You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, we're back in Ireland. We're going down to County Cork to be joined by Conor Lyden, the founder and CEO of Trustap. Conor, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
Delighted to have you. We were chatting off air. One of the three, if we focus on three areas on this podcast, any loyal listeners will know I'm about to say the three areas are early influences, challenges, and pivotal moments. No different with you. Let's go right back to the beginning. I believe you are I've already alluded to the fact you're from Cork. I believe you're from a village just south of the city. Any favorite memories from your childhood or standout memories while growing up in Cork?
Well, I actually was born. I was born in Cork, but grew up for the first couple of years in Clonakilty, which would be in West Cork. And my parents had a dental surgery down there, so we moved to Carrigaline then when I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. So yeah, I went to school in Carrigaline. All my friends would be from Carrigaline. And I spent my summers in West Cork then as well, in Baltimore. So my probably fondest memories would be down there. Or else kind of playing sport growing up was sport mad. Played probably 8 or 10 different sports every year until I was about 14 or 15. So they'd be the main ones, I'd say.
So what's your favorite sport at the moment?
I would say the golf really at the moment would be the main one. I kind of hung up the boots and most of the other kind of field sports and stuff. So it'd be primarily golf, yeah.
Nice. A typical audience for this is entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders of small to medium-sized companies across the UK and Ireland, with the US listening as well. If anyone who's never been to Cork before was to spend an afternoon or a day there, what one thing would you recommend they visit?
Well, Cork's actually like a pretty interesting city. You know, it's for those that don't know, it'd be Ireland's second city. And it's growing as well. So there's lots of kind of multinationals relocating there. Got a bit of work going on where offices and apartments are being built at the moment. But really, if you're kind of like I am in your 20s and you're looking to spend an evening, I'd say some of the bars or some of the pubs are really, really good. And there's a great atmosphere around the place the weekends. So for the kind of social side, I'd say that. And then if you were wanted to be a bit touristy and see kind of a few sites, I'd say travel down the Wild Atlantic Way and hit up some of those spots in West Cork. They're unreal, and you wouldn't be let down there either.
From someone who's done his leaving cert around the same year as you did, I agree. Great answer. I'm from just on the border of Meath and Dublin. I'm actually in County Meath. Hope you don't want to hang up. I'm actually not a Meath or Dublin supporter. I'm a Kilkenny supporter. All my family are from Kilkenny. So I support the Black and Amber. I've been season ticket holder for over a decade now. Haven't missed a game. Sticking with your childhood, who do you think inspired you the most or had the biggest impact on you growing up? I know that both your parents worked for themselves, which would have been cool growing up to see that and to grow up around that.
Yeah, they'd have to be the main ones. Obviously, you're exposed to that when you're younger. To be honest, I never really considered like the whole entrepreneurial route as a viable career option until maybe about 2 weeks before I started, or 2 weeks into even the kind of incubator program that I went on to. I was kind of just going with the flow. I was always very I suppose my decisions would always be based on what gave me the most options always. I never really wanted to commit to anything. So I was doing this to kind of get a bit of experience initially. And like, I knew I had an idea, but I wasn't, say, fully set on doing that. And even, you know, when I was picking my leaving cert subjects, I had, I'm sure I had med down first. I did the HPAT, like actually got a good result in the HPAT, just missed out on the points. I think I had engineering second and something like Chinese and commerce third. So I was all over the place. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I'd say that was kind of a common theme growing up. I was never one of those people that said, oh, I want to be, an astronaut or anything like that. I never had a very clear picture. But definitely could see the benefits, as you said, of my parents having their own business, working for themselves. Could see both sides of it.
What was it that influenced you to stick down? You said med, engineering, Chinese and commerce,
Yeah.
because they're all three different kind of things, and there's something must have influenced you, or was it just that you enjoyed them and were good at them?
I think I did. So it was kind of different reasons for all of them. So I put med down first because it was the highest points, and I kind of felt if I got that, I might as well go for that. Did quite well in the HPAT and felt like I'll put it down on the CAO. Engineering, then I was good at maths and physics, or I liked it anyway. And I said, that's probably a good broad degree as well. So that was down second, and then the commerce, like the languages were something that. So I went to Wales School growing up. So again, like everything being taught through Irish, I found picking up the languages quite easy. So French and any other language in school would have come naturally enough as well. It wouldn't have been very difficult, and did quite well in those subjects. So I might as well try and pick up another one that might be useful in business and stuff. And everyone was talking about Chinese and how that would be a useful one going forward. So that was literally the logic behind it. I wouldn't say I spent too long thinking about it, to be honest. I was aware that your career choice wasn't necessarily going to be defined by what you put on your CAO anyway. I knew that you could kind of change, and I was pretty relaxed about it. So
yeah, well, whatever. What I did in college is nothing like I do today. A couple of things I know about you before we jump in. Coach at the Newport Yacht Club. Yeah. You've already mentioned you're into golf. I know you're into football as well. You've been to the States, Spain. What's one thing you're into or curious about that not a lot of people would know about you?
That's a very good question. I think at the moment, I always listen to podcasts about, or would regularly listen to podcasts about around kind of, business people, CEOs, things like that. And they'd always say how, they like reading books and kind of topical books around what they're doing, management, strategy books, things like that. And I wouldn't really be like that at all. I kind of, I'd be more inclined to talk to people and get a few tips here and there. I've never been a big one for sitting down and reading a book cover to cover. Well, definitely not a management one anyway. I'd be more likely to do it if it was fiction. So I think, for me, I'd be much more, if on a weekend there's something I try and avoid anything like that, which would be very different, I think, from talking to my peers. I'd be much more inclined to, watch a movie, watch a series, kind of a couple of episodes a day, that kind of thing, which I know is probably not the norm.
I've been in your shoes before. I downloaded an app called Blinkist, which essentially condenses these kind of books into 15-minute podcasts and gives you the core elements of like the book and the takeaway so that you can come away. Because if you think of it, most books that I'm looking at here, I could tell you what the concept of the book is or the idea of what the message is in less than like 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah. Might be worth checking out if you ever are getting on board a plane or something, but definitely worth it. Blinkist is the app. You were part of an incubation program called Ignite. You've touched on it for a second. I know that now that you're the founder and CEO of TrustUp, did any lessons? Did you learn any lessons from that incubation program? What did it teach you?
Yeah, well, as I was kind of saying earlier, I went in there not really even knowing what entrepreneurship was, and I'm not just saying that, like, that's not an exaggeration. I genuinely didn't really know. I kind of took a punt on it, and I wasn't really sure what was involved. Didn't really even know what the kind of schedule for the program was going to be starting off. As you mentioned there earlier, I was in America that summer, and I had, again, didn't really want to. I had finished my 4 years of engineering, didn't really know what I wanted to do there. So I said I'd go on a grad program with Accenture. I applied for a couple of grad programs, got on a management consulting one with Accenture, and I said, okay, I have that. And then I had heard about Ignite, so I put an application in there with this idea, and I was weighing up the two options, and I kind of felt, or I'll give the Ignite one a bash. It's kind of a bit different. And I didn't really know anything about it when I started. And then when I did get going, it was like pretty much everything that I learned was there. I would say, like, to start with anyway. It was a purely kind of a structured process around starting a business and doing things the right way, meeting people. Best thing about it was that there was 9 other businesses in there at the same time. So people at the same stage of the journey, and you're kind of learning a lot from them. and you weren't on your own, which is the main thing. Because like you talk to people who don't utilize a program like that, and they try and do it, and it's very difficult. You might be locked up in your bedroom, and you can be there's I wouldn't say dark times, but there's certainly times when you think, this is silly, like it's not going to work or whatever. And it's nice to have a group of people in a similar situation around you when those times do come along.
This is probably episode number, 88, 89 of the podcast I've done this year. And a roller coaster of emotions is how many people describe entrepreneurship. Fear, doubt, worry, something that comes up on a daily or weekly basis for most. How do you manage fear, doubt, or worry?
I'd say one of like my biggest assets is probably that I'd be quite level. Like I don't really get like majorly upset if something bad happens, or majorly excited if something good happens either, which, I know it is important to celebrate the good things, but I find it difficult sometimes because I'm kind of thinking, there's more to do or whatever. And like that definitely helps, just having that mindset. Because it can be a roller coaster of emotions. And I think I went to a talk before, someone described it as when you're starting the business, you sleep like a baby because you wake up every 4 hours crying. And there's an element of that to it. I think that if you can manage, like, and that's a skill in itself, if you can kind of train yourself to not get too upset and not get too excited, you'll probably have a better stamina for it long term. Because you get, like, otherwise you could be dancing around the room and crying 4 times a day, and that's not sustainable. So I think that would be the main thing.
You touched on that you went to a Gael school. One of my regrets is not learning Irish properly. My girlfriend first learned Irish, then learned English, and when we're abroad, if she wants to say something to me, she'll speak in Irish and I won't have a clue what she's saying. But my question is not that. It is, if you could add any subject mandatory to the leaving certificate, A-levels, if you're listening from the UK, that everyone had to study, what would it be?
I might be a bit biased, but I think if you look at the business world anyway, I think communication is one of the key things. So I know English is kind of mandatory anyway, but I also think, so that aside, like communication being one of the most important things, I think an unbelievable asset to have is to be competent with numbers. And I'm not talking about doing like honors level, maths and getting an A in your leaving cert. I just mean like basic things. And I think like so much of life's kind of struggles or the pressure is around money and, understanding, simple things like interest, taxation, things like that. And I just think, if you have a basic grasp of numbers, even like, it might sound mad to me or you to say, but things like, percentages, things like that actually generally a lot of people would struggle with. I think that is such a key skill everywhere in life. So that would be the one for me.
This is my 5th podcast to record today. And all 5 people have said something around finance. So there's something to that. Before we get into any of these questions that I have around cookbooks and etc., you'll need to explain to people what TrustUp is. So if you could take 30, 45 seconds to explain what the business is.
So what TrustUp is basically is it's a transaction platform. So it's designed for people who are buying or selling online with untrusted parties, basically. So people they don't know, businesses they don't know. And the general concept is that it's like escrow, where the funds are held by us as a third party. But then we also manage the rest of the transaction. So, if it's an item being delivered, we'll track it and make sure it arrives, and we'll manage the full transaction from end to end, so that you don't have to place your trust in someone or some business that you don't know. We have a standalone platform, but we also partner with marketplaces where those transactions happen. So, the classic example would be the likes of a Craigslist type marketplace that everyone would be familiar with. Generally, a seller would place an ad there and a buyer would respond to it privately and they'd arrange where to meet. But we have a product basically where they can both use TrustUp for the transaction and kind of ensure that it happens safely, efficiently, fairly. That's the general gist.
I was surprised of how popular this concept idea is. I first came across it in boxing, when a lot of the big boxers will use escrow accounts to put their money in, and when all conditions are met, they'll pay out. So with that being said, I want to ask you a question around cookbooks, not a recipe book to cook a cake or something. It's basically just a list of things. I've got a laminated one in front of me that you've got to do daily to keep your pipeline healthy. So number of networking events, outreach calls, referrals, yada, 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 yada. What would your daily or weekly cookbook look like so that you can continue to take TrustUp in the direction you want to take it in?
Well, early on, I would have said a lot of the time I spent on the business would have been kind of sales orientated stuff. Nowadays, it's a little bit different because we have people, and that's their main role. So I would say for me, the main thing is kind of communication, and then obviously the kind of stage we're at now is fundraising as well, which is like almost like a full-time job. But communication, but what I mean by that is with kind of like all of the team leads or the employees in the business, and it's kind of making sure that that everything is running as smoothly as possible, and that if anyone needs anything that I can get them whatever they need, whatever tools, resources that they need, and then it's reporting to whether it's investors or the board or whatever. But from the fundraising perspective, I'd say, you're just constantly in fundraising mode. I think that it's you can, even if you just close around, you're looking at the next one, and you've a fairly accurate, hopefully, set of projections that you're working off, and you know exactly how much you'll need to get in, or different models based on how well the business is doing. And so that is an ever evolving thing. When you're at the start, it's with kind of maybe smaller kind of angel investors or smaller groups of syndicates, and then you move on to kind of VCs and larger VCs, and that's there's a lot in that. There's preparing data rooms and getting all the information they need. It's almost like a sales pipeline in a way. You've different investors, different VCs at different stages that require different information, that require different levels of communication. Everything's done virtually at the moment, so it's all Zoom calls and Google Meets and Microsoft Teams pretty much all day. Keeping that moving along.
Another thing I noticed is you put up on LinkedIn recently, I can't remember, it was a week or a month ago, but that you're hiring. Study done by Harvard Business Review that says that the cost of a bad hire is 5 times the first year's salary. So how do you partner with recruiters? Do you use psychometric testing? Do you go off gut feel? How do you make sure that you limit your chances of getting a bad hire?
I think it's easier in some roles than others. There's some roles where, for want of a better word, you wouldn't be able to spoof like the interview process. So for some of the more practical like roles like software development, anything like that, you can have kind of like a culture fit interview first, so that they're you'll be able to get on with them, that they're the right person, and then it's essentially a test. So they're literally they're coding in front of you, and straight away if they're at the right level or not. It's very difficult to kind of bluff your way out of that when you don't know what you're going to be doing in advance of it. You're not necessarily looking for them to complete it exactly the way you want it to, but it's the process they follow. It's the it's the methodology. So that one I would never be worried about getting the wrong person skills wise. You can potentially get the culture fit wrong over time. If they don't get on with everyone after a certain period of time, but that's less of a risk. And then for the other roles like sales and stuff, it's incredibly difficult because any good salesperson would be able to sell themselves quite well in an interview. So you need to use different metrics, different ways of kind of making that decision. But ultimately, it's really difficult. So what you want to do for any startup really is to have pretty solid HR processes in place. And with any early kind of hire like that, you'll have a probationary period, and you just have to act fast. If it's not the right fit, you kind of have to make that decision quickly, because the longer they're there, and if they pass that probationary period, then you'll have problems. I'm not surprised by that stat. I think it's certainly it's the time it wastes more than anything, and time is money basically. So I definitely can see how that could be the case.
Yeah, specifically with salespeople, it could be deals not won as well that could add up to a lot of money. Sure. Whereas if you would otherwise hired a better salesperson, there's a book to my side, and it's around these 13 blind spots that can hold back an otherwise healthy business. Things like hiring, lead generation, so on, so on, so on. What's one blind spot that you've witnessed over the last 4 or 5 years that you think holds back some businesses from getting to where they truly could be? And if they got their shit together in that one area, they'd be a much better performing business.
Yeah, I actually think, like, without sounding too cliche or whatever, like, it actually is like a proper method of communication and having like processes and systems where two teams can work together efficiently. So if you take a product team that will feed into like the backlog of tech tasks that the development team have to do, having a really efficient way that those two teams speak to each other can save 2 months in a calendar year in terms of stuff being built, which is obviously a lot. And, you know, stuff and having that feedback loop really efficient and quick and, you know, not wasting time. And in some ways, actually, remotely, that almost works a bit easier. You can kind of work off a very clear schedule in the calendars. Calls are happening at this time every week, regardless. So, you know, it's that constant feedback loop, iterating on whatever is being made. I think it's massively kind of undervalued, I would say. Like, I don't really, you know, I'm not in other businesses very often or kind of can see what they're doing, but I know that ever since that we got more of a process around that and more kind of efficient at that whole thing, our productivity has kind of skyrocketed. So I think, you know, there must be something in that for other people too. Like, you might think you have a few systems in place, but the amount of time lost is quite big when you're waiting for someone to do something else before you can do the next thing. You're trying to avoid that as much as possible.
From chatting to you for the last 25 minutes or so, I'd hazard a guess that if you were ever to come out with a book, it would be on the subject of communication.
Yeah.
What's your go on?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think it's kind of one of those things that everybody thinks that they do properly, but until you then do it properly, you know that what you were doing probably wasn't sufficient, you know. Like, I think again, I would say, I kind of mentioned it when you're talking about the leaving certain subjects or whatever, the amount of people that you encounter who, you know, can't communicate properly, don't write emails properly, don't you know, aren't organized but responding, forget to do certain things. It's mad. And like, it's such a simple thing, but it's so fundamental in my opinion.
Yeah, it's shocking. What's your favorite aspect of leading the company?
I think I like the responsibility, but also I like the, you know, for me, I would have always probably struggled to go into the company at the very bottom, and not that I'd struggle to work my way up, but I wouldn't like having not really affecting the outcome of what I'm doing. I'd find it difficult to motivate myself. I think my favorite thing about leading the business is that I don't struggle with motivation at all, because, you know, it's going to benefit me anyway, how it does. And I find it very, very, I never struggle to get out of bed in the morning, get up early and go to work. And that's probably the biggest thing.
2 final questions for you. Your loved ones are all safe, but your house is burning down. What one item would you save if you could only save one item?
Ooh, it's a very good question. So no pets or anything like that. That's up there, I'll say.
Well, if you love your pet, then it's safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Well, I suppose where I'm at now, like, my day consists of my laptop and then in my spare time at the weekends, my golf clubs probably. So it's a very boring answer, but that's probably it.
Fair enough. Most people choose their laptop. So the fact you're choosing your golf clubs is somewhat different than most people. I'd like you to imagine we're now talking as if it's the year 2030. So right now it's 2030, and you're looking back on the last decade. You can answer this personally, professionally, or a combination of both. But what would you like to be looking back on if we're imagining now is 2030?
Growth to be the biggest one. So I think, you know, professionally, I think, you know, I'll know in 2030, which is I'll know that if it's worked or not, definitely at that stage. And I think, we have plans, and if we can hit our milestones, like that's the number one kind of target for us. I don't have major plans around acquisition or anything like that. It's to hit those kind of growth metrics. And if we do that, then everything else will fall into place, I think. So that'd be the one thing. And then personally, yeah, I'd like to, have a house bought at that point, and be comfortable, settled. That they'd be the two.
Conor, I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope you achieve those goals within the next decade. But for being my guest today, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rian. Really appreciate it.